Recording in progress. Well, thank
We
you,
are now
computer
on
lady.
the air. Welcome to the podcast. We
The
are
Fleeting
now
Thoughts
on.
podcast.
Hello, everyone.
Come one, come all.
Yes,
Come
read
down
all
to the
about it.
corner and gather around the old radio. The
Yes.
shows.
Come around the corner. There's a radio on the corner now. It's the only radio in town.
It's
And
for those who don't have the radio at home because of the Great Recession.
And now, in local news, everyone's got COVID. Oh,
Everything's
God.
shutting down.
Yes,
the hospitals are overflowing.
Yes. Don't go to the hospital. Stay home.
No, not unless you want to meet with the National Guard.
Yes, they're out in swarms. The old National Guard. It reminds me of when they tried to segregate or desegregate. Remember that time?
They had the military come in and say, no, you all belong together.
Yes.
We do not segregate anymore.
Let them in. Don't stop hosing people. I remember hosing everyone.
Gather around this water fountain. It's not a Negro-only water fountain anymore.
No,
Strike the sign down, good sir.
It's a cesspool for everyone.
Everybody
can
come
drink from this
on
shit.
it.
Yes,
Throw
put your
up
mouth all
perhaps.
around it.
Speaking of that, I remember in elementary school, one of my memories that sticks out is a kid who got sick from lunch or something, and he went to get a drink of water and just threw up all over the water fountain in the hallway.
Oh man.
And I remember never using that water fountain again. Because, obviously they came and cleaned it, but I'm just like, every time I was looking at it, I'm like, all I can think about is this kid's puked is all over this thing. So let me go use the other one. That's my personal experience with water fountains and segregation is that one time
you
that a kid threw up on a water fountain.
You self-segregated?
has nothing to, I self-segregated myself from the vomit water fountain.
Yeah, you should be more inclusive of
I should include
in water fountains.
Include the vomit water fountains in my life.
Yeah.
Got to live a little. That's how you build immunities, is taking other people's germs and putting them inside you.
Yeah, manually, digitally.
Mm-hmm.
And then you put it all and
suck up a little water out of that water fountain.
Oh, can I have some of your diseases? Oh, can I put that in me?
I very much like that. That'd be great.
Yeah, that's how you get immune to STDs.
Mm-hmm.
You have someone stick them in you.
Could I borrow a little crab from you? I'd like to just go ahead and plant him in the old pubis, if you don't mind.
Just one crab, and then, my body will create fighter crabs, white cell crabs that will defeat it and become, my own
super
soldier
I'll have
crabs.
my own super crabs that'll destroy your normal crabs.
Yes, but then they will go away and not become a nuisance when you're not around.
Or until I decide to light my pubic fair hairs on fire and stab them all with toothpicks as they come running out.
Yes, and they are fair hair. They're quite pale. My hairs.
Only
with a toothpick. The one thing, a little tiny crab. They're not really crabs, are they? Are they like sideways?
Do they actually
crabbers?
look? Have you ever seen?
I don't know. I probably looked them up.
Yeah, somebody, God, I don't remember why I looked it up. It was like earlier this year, because I was like, do they actually look like little fucking, and you look at them, you're like, yeah, shit, they actually kind of look like little.
Do you think they're so angry because they're not in the ocean anymore, and they're like, let's attack this human?
Well, they're not really like this pubic hair aren't seawater. What's
it's kind of like
on?
lice. Like lice isn't really a problem. It's not like it's hurting you. It's just living there and gross
and sucking the blood out of your scalp. But
but I mean, you got plenty of blood in your scalp.
Oh yeah, too much.
Like a tick can give you diseases. I bet lice can give you diseases too.
Probably, I'm sure.
That's probably one of the reasons you don't want to have lice. But we have little microscopic stuff on us anyway.
Oh yeah, all the time.
All the time.
All the time.
Literally.
Just always. I can feel it crawling. I can't sleep at night because everything's crawling on me.
Is that why you get like weird random itches? Is because there's enough little microfauna on you that it like accumulates on one part of your skin and actually you can feel it?
I think what it is that there's so much orgasm.
That's a sneeze.
There's so many microorganisms on your body, and they're constantly at war. And so when you feel an itch, that was like a little
fighting.
little mini nuclear bomb went off on your skin. Was one just annihilated the other one. And you're just like, dang, that was itchy.
A little micro.
But really, it was the death of like a million microorganisms in a nuclear blast.
So you're saying that war is inevitable and part of all of nature, regardless of scale.
Yeah, violence is nature. That's deep. I know, right?
Not like, nature is violence, but violence is nature.
Yeah, that's how you. If somebody was like, "How would you define nature?" I'd just be like, "Violence, man."
Like if you get down to the cellular level, it's just cells fighting it out for like dominance.
Yep.
Trying to get bigger, trying to get more
bigger,
nutrients.
better.
They're not working together.
How was your last couple weeks? We didn't record last weekend because reasons I don't remember. I know we felt a little unprepared because we wanted to, for the topic of the show, we wanted a little bit more time. I can't remember.
Yeah.
I know. Oh, you know what it was? Is we were gonna do it last Sunday, but I had something going on that day.
Yeah, I also got a new camera bag for my trip to Hawaii. I got a bag for my camera that I can also put in like other stuff. And I was like really geared up to like go on a hike and do some photos.
Nice. Okay. Well,
and you know what I did? I took some photos.
Wow.
I went on a hike and I tested out my new bag.
Twist I did not see coming.
I know. Sometimes I do things unpredictably, like going to the same park every 2 weeks.
I wonder if you've been enough times, there are people at the park who are like, "Hey, looks like creepy guy with the camera again."
Probably.
That's how they identify you now, is the short creepy guy with
there aren't a lot of dudes with cameras, and there aren't a lot of dudes who are by themselves.
Yeah.
And so I'm sure if people notice, but I don't remember seeing the same people, but I'm also not really paying attention to the individual people.
Are there like children that play the park? Because if there are, and then you start noticing that when you show up, the parents are like gathering the children and leaving, that's a sign.
It's like a nature park. It's not like a swing,
like a playground.
Such. Okay. It's like 100 acres of like forest and stuff.
Okay.
Kids are out there, but they're not.
People are gathering up their loved ones and departing as soon as you arrive.
Pointing at me and saying, "Oh, he's back. Go. Run.
It's the camera guy. Get out of here."
No, he takes pictures.
It makes me very uncomfortable. What's he doing with all those pictures? Is he putting them on his social media? You didn't get my permission to put my pictures on your social media. I'm trying to hide from my husband who tried to kill me 3 years ago, and I'm under police protection, and we had to move over here and change our names. And here you are taking pictures of me, just putting it on Facebook. What's wrong with you, fella?
That's elaborate. Yeah, I don't take pictures of people almost ever. That's why I'm an unsuccessful photographer.
I was going to say, maybe that's why all your photos are so beautiful. There's just not the ugliness of humanity in them.
Well, yeah, fuck people. But it's hard to get a fucking owl to pay you for taking its photo. It's hard to get an owl to let you take its photo.
Drops off a dead field mouse at your feet. Thanks for the pictures.
I hope this fucking makes us even there, fuck face.
Yeah. If you, I don't think he's got diseases. He was pretty plump. You just gotta
taste pretty
you
fresh.
can eat the whole thing and then just spit up the fur and stuff and make a nest with it if you want, or you can skin it.
I don't know what you guys do with your little fucking rodents, but there's plenty of them out there. I'll get you more. You give me some more photos. That would be a great deal. Are you kidding me? I would, if an owl would pose for photos, I would pay it.
Also, you would want to capture that owl and then find a laboratory and be like, this owl
also talks,
knows how to barter, knows how to talk.
Yeah, there's a whole fucking thing going on.
He's from Brooklyn. I don't know why. How he got over to Oregon, but here he is. And then you would have to hope that the owl would then talk. Otherwise, you're insane. And that's really the moral of the story, is that you're so lonely.
Yeah, that's actually
this dialogue you're having with the owl is all in your head.
And there's no owl.
You just show up at the lab with a dead mouse. You gave me this.
Hey, what do you think about this situation I got going on here with the this owl gave this to me? And then you try to show him an owl, and it's just like a fucking like fake owl stuffed animal in your house. What has been talking to me?
It paid me with this mouse for my photos.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, sorry. Well, how's your anything?
How's my
anything of note over the last couple of weeks worth proclaiming to anybody listening?
Proclaim. Let me proclaim a little. Just let me think about what to proclaim. No, I just been gearing up for this trip to Hawaii. So I got a new bag, I got a new piece of luggage, I got a new tripod. I'm just kind of thinking about all the different things I want to do when I'm there, and
Nice. When are you
kind
going?
of interesting. In September, late September.
Oh, okay. You got some time then. You got about
Yeah,
a
I got
month or
about a
so.
month to keep planning it out. You have to fill out a thing for the Hawaii government so that you can bypass their quarantine protocols if you have a vax card.
Mm.
So that paid off, which is nice because I got the vaccine mostly to get to
I was gonna
Hawaii
say, wasn't
and
that
other
kind of like
traveling
the
kind of concepts.
what pushed you into it?
It was like an immediate kind of thing. And so I filled out this whole form about, and what's crazy is they ask you everything about your trip. Like it's like going to another country, which I think is mildly offensive, although I understand that they're an island and so they're very susceptible to,
Mm-hmm.
you know, island wide problems, like if you bring in food or, you know, diseases. So
Yeah.
they have to treat things a little differently than a normal state. But it did feel like I'm kind of like going to a different country where they ask you exactly what your trip is, when you're going to be there, where you're going to be, what
Who
hotel
you're
you're staying
sleeping
at.
with.
They ask who's no, they didn't really ask who else you were with unless you had kids.
Mm.
Um, and uh, and then that you can add a copy of your Vax card, and that they will review, and then you get this little code, and that allows you to not get quarantined while you're there, which is, you know, I'm only there for, you know, 8 days, and the quarantine's for 14 days. Like I can't stay here.
Well, sir, your trip is actually going to be 14 days now, so
Yeah. Plus,
enjoy
you
the
gotta
inside of
fucking
your hotel room.
enjoy this one room, and you don't get any food, and I hope you fucking die. So, you know, aren't you glad
Welcome
you
to
came to Hawaii?
Hawaii.
Yeah, welcome to Hawaii. Wah, wah, wah. Wah, wah, wah. Boo boo. Fuck you.
One of the
So
guys I
yeah,
worked with, he actually moved to Hawaii last year, and that was like the first thing they had to do was they had to
yeah.
get like they did like an Airbnb at somebody's house, and they had to stay at that house for 14 days, and then they could move into their own like place, and he could start working and all that stuff. It was
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. Super
Yeah, I
interesting.
imagine going to Hawaii or like even probably Alaska is probably a lot like going to another country because they're just so disconnected from the
Yeah.
mainland.
But Alaska's very spread out and open,
Mm-hmm.
whereas Hawaii's condensed and an island. So I
Yeah.
think there's a difference there in that. But I don't know. I've been to Alaska, but only from a cruise perspective. So we did a
Mm-hmm.
cruise around the coast, and then we would stop, you know, every day at a port, and we would go off for little hikes and stuff. That was awesome. But
That's
we
one of the
didn't have to
places
do
I kind of
anything.
want to move to and just live is in Alaska.
Really?
Thinking about like the remoteness of it and like
Yeah.
I don't know, it's like really appealing in
I want to
terms of
take a
just being
trip
like
for
fleeing.
photos. I want to go
Mm-hmm.
like during a summer sometime and just go for like a month and go just on treks and take photos and
Because it seems like it would be a lot like living in Oregon, just obviously a lot colder and you have the snow and
well,
everything. But I
if you
mean, it's, in
go,
terms of like
yeah,
it's a lot of forestry and
yeah,
mountains and
it's just a
stuff like that.
continuation of the same kind of forest
Mm-hmm.
systems. But obviously in the winter you just get like no light, and it's very depressing, and you can't do much, and it's super, you know, cold. But
As
in the
long as I
summer,
got
I'm sure it's
power and
super nice.
internet and video games and I can write and read, I'm
Wanna,
good, bruh.
just want to go live out in the fucking in the dark. I
That's
don't
why,
want to
like,
do
when the
that.
quarantines and stuff were happening, where everything was shut down, I was like, this isn't really changing my day to day life that
Yeah.
much. I'm such a homebody. Yeah. Like, it sucks. What if I want to go to like a restaurant and get some food and they're closed? But, then I just figure something else out. It's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, either New Zealand or Alaska. Those are like the two destinations where I'm like, I kind of want to just like pick
Yeah.
one of those to move. New Zealand would just be harder because it's another country. So you got to like a whole bunch of
You got to learn that,
converting and you got to
you
become a
know,
citizen and
Kiwi.
all
You
kinds
got
of
to
stuff.
learn that Kiwi language.
Yeah. Can't just go around saying good day, mate, and just hope that
Yeah. I
that they
just
all
realized
understand you.
I think my front door is open. You think I should close it?
If you want. I mean, do you have it open to get a little breeze going through the apartment
Yeah,
or
I just leave it open all the time. Like a lot of the time when I'm
weird?
at my
Okay.
house. Um, I I'm gonna go check it. Just give me
Okay.
2 seconds. Sorry.
Oh god. He doesn't have to piss himself. He's gotta go shut his front door. It's 2021. You should not be leaving your front door open, even if you're home. Everybody knows that there's criminals and crooks and rapists and murderers at every turn. You should never leave your front door open.
I leave it open all the time, especially in the summer.
I was just telling people they should. It's 2021. You can't. Even if you're home, don't leave your front door open. There's rapers and the murderers and the muggers and the kidnappers.
Oh, not the rapists. I just don't worry about it too much because there's, I don't know. It's like, what are you gonna do? They're gonna like walk in and start murdering me? I don't think so.
I always want to leave because we have a screen door on our front door, and so like when the weather's nice outside, it's not like sweltering or freezing. I always want to have the front door open and just the screen open, but then my dogs will just sit at the screen and stare out at the street and bark at anything that walks by. And also our neighbor's door is like right across from ours, and so he probably always wants to talk to us and shit because
and you're like
fucking old man who's lonely.
Yeah.
So this is a whole ordeal.
Do you have a back door? You could
I leave our back screen door because we have a sliding glass door in our bedroom that goes out to the backyard. And I leave that thing open like all day unless it's really hot and we're trying to have the AC cool the house down, then I shut it off, or shut it down, close it, whatever.
Yeah,
shut it down, shut the back door down. Yeah, take that to the bank and smoke
it. Yeah, shut it down. I don't think
it's one of the few times I watched your eyes completely glaze over and
like,
you seemed completely lost as to what was going on.
I was thinking about something else too. I was thinking about the fact that there was a small fire at my apartment complex and I wanted to mention it. You're talking about things.
Yeah, we got did you get warnings on your phone today about the weather today?
No,
because they said it's the high winds and low humidity, so it's a cause for, like, they're putting out warnings because of how easy fires can spread in that weather. So I was like, oh great.
Yeah,
it's a great thing to get first thing.
I think that might be Eugene because I'm looking outside and there's like no wind. So, and Eugene usually has higher winds than Portland does.
Well, we live out in Harrisburg, and since it's like all flat farmland, it gets breezy as fuck around here because there's just no mountains or anything to break up the wind, and it just gets very blustery.
Yeah. At work, I had a bum, some homeless dude start a fire in the parking lot. Just a small one, like just
cold?
For no reason. No, it was like 82 degrees.
Maybe he had
a blanket on too. So he was just walking around, and he got a pizza box that had some pizza in it from the trash, and he just lit it on fire and was like sticking things in it from his bag or whatever. And it was just on the sidewalk, like at work. And I was like, God damn it. So I ran over, I grabbed a bottle of water and I just dumped it on him. I was like, dude, get the fuck out of here. I'm going to call the police. You can't start fires. Like, this is horribly dangerous.
There's better ways to heat up your leftover garbage pizza than just lighting the whole box on fire.
Yeah. How are you going to eat it? It's going to just burn up. And it was crazy. What's crazy is that a couple days earlier, another homeless lady had been burning her clothes in the corner of the same parking lot. Like, I don't know what's going on, but people
bathing him in the holy fire. Just getting rid of the lice.
There's a nice little cult going on that
they're honestly probably very mentally unwell or hopped up on meth or a combination of the two.
I see them all the time.
Yeah, it's bad, man.
Yeah, but there's
a lot of the homeless population in like Eugene. A lot of them do have different like behavioral health issues, and then they're self-medicating with meth and whatever other drugs they can get their hands on, and it just obviously fucking exacerbates the problem considerably.
Yeah, there's no like good state intervention for these people, and in Portland it is very, very bad. It is rampant homelessness, mental illness, petty crimes, violent crimes, all sorts of stuff. Police are not able to handle it, and a lot of it is not even like, shouldn't even be their problem. It would be like you would have a mental intervention or like medical interventions, like with homes or whatever. I don't know. Sedate them, I guess, is the idea.
Solution.
That's what they used to do, is they just keep them in a home, sedate them, and they were, as free as they could handle. But then the rest of society didn't have to deal with it.
Yeah. Well, there's just too many of them. There's just too many people who are struggling from whatever ails them and there's causing them to be homeless, So
there's a lot.
There's just nothing that Yeah.
I don't
That's
think
why I
they're
want to
doing
move to
anything.
Alaska. Who wants to move to Alaska and
Yeah.
be homeless in Alaska? It'd be fucking
I don't
cold.
know. I would imagine there's still some homeless people there, especially in
I'm
big
sure.
cities.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy to get all negative. But there was a little fire in the apartments, and the paramedics or the fire department came, put it out, and everything's all right. But they're remodeling it right now.
Transient person trying to cook pizza again, or
just an old lady who wasn't doing something right and started a little fire in her apartment inside.
Oh, okay.
And she was just outside her apartment, just like it was just smoking all up in her apartment. And so obviously it wasn't all the way out, but somebody had gone in and tried to put it out.
And then you make the sudden kind of realization, which I think we all know it, but it really comes to the forefront when that kind of thing happens, is that you're really trusting all of your neighbors in your apartment complex to not burn everybody's homes down. Yeah. It's like all it takes is one idiot in like a building of apartments to just ruin everybody's lives because.
Well, and they have we all have stoves and candles and lighters and cigarettes and it's tentative. I was thinking I want to get a fire extinguisher just for myself, just something that I know will put out any type of fire, because water will put out most fires and you can put a blanket over stuff, but certain fires you don't want to use water. And so I thought a fire extinguisher might be a good idea. Just run around putting out fires. And then you know what I did that you probably already have is I got renter's insurance. I was like, you know what, if my whole fucking house went down, I'd be fucked. Yeah, dude. I actually have stuff now as an adult that I care about, and I would be not happy if I lost it all.
Yeah, we used to do renter's insurance. Just it was like tacked onto our car insurance. We just went because we have State Farm, and so you just add the renter's insurance policy onto your car insurance every month. And then now we have homeowners insurance also through State Farm. We just switched it to that,
especially with a loan.
Well, yeah, it's like a requirement. They won't process it unless you get a quote from your insurance company. So
I added a renter's insurance and from the same company I do my car insurance, and I paid for like the first. I think I'm paying like 3 months at a time. It's not even
really that expensive, really. Like our renter's insurance, it was like I think it's $10-15 extra a month or something, maybe something around there. I don't remember exactly. I just remember being surprised at how cheap it is, because I'm like, wow, because if this place burns down, you can get a pretty big payout to help.
But the odds are pretty low.
Your stuff.
The odds are pretty low that anything's going to happen. So they, if 1,000 people get renter's insurance, and then one person's house goes up, they can pay for that, no problem. Insurance, they're making crazy amounts of money.
Oh yeah,
it's insane. The longer things are better, the more money they make. It's crazy.
Well, and then when something happens, they try to get out of paying for it any way they can.
They work hard to make sure they don't have to pay.
Yep,
because they want to make that money.
Or make sure, especially if it's like Vanessa got T-boned last year, and thankfully the people who hit her also had the same insurance company as us. I was they process it like right away. I'm like, yeah, because they're not trying to get a different insurance company to pay for this.
Yeah, they just pay
they
themselves.
Have to pay for it. They just have to pay for it no matter what. So
yeah,
because they just had to pay Vanessa because they ended up totaling her car, and then had to just pay her that lump sum of what the car was worth so she could get another one. And,
nice.
But I was like, if it was a different insurance company, we probably had to wait like an extra month or two while they fucking talked back and forth and then work together or whatever to get that shit squared away.
For sure.
But I feel like since it was all the same company, they're like, oh, fuck it, here you go. Anyway,
I don't know. Fuck it.
Let's get into the
let's do it.
Topic of the show.
Yeah, cool. Top topic time. What are we talking about?
So you finished Tender is the Flesh recently. And we both really wanted to talk about it. No, it's perfect. It was like blurry for a second, but then it focused on it. So
good.
What's the name? Agustina. I can't remember what the last name is. It starts with
Agustina Bazterrica.
Which is probably not how it's pronounced, but we're dumb white Americans and we do what we can.
It's pretty close. I mean, Bazterrica. It's probably got an accent to it, a little.
It's a Spanish novelist. She wrote the book it came out in 2017 in Spanish, and then it didn't come out it doesn't get translated to English till 2020, so last year.
Yeah, she's Argentinian, I think. She's an Argentine novelist, and then it was translated by Sarah Moses, who does a ton of translations. The translation seemed very good in that it didn't seem, it had like, all the main characters had like Argentinian names, and they ate like Argentinian food. Like they didn't try to like change the cultural aspects.
Yeah, like
of
Americanize it or something.
Did you turn a little light on your face there?
No, I was just opening a window on my computer.
A little white window, I'm guessing.
Yes.
I
was pulling up the see if I could find like a list of characters just so I could remember the names, because I know the main character's name is Marcos.
Sure.
So I can't remember the names of all the other little characters. So I was trying to see if I could find just like a list.
This is one of the first books that we both read, like other than your books, which we could both chat about if we want, and we do plenty. And it also is a very controversial topic because it talks dives into cannibalism as a kind of normal situation, which is very interesting. And I was going to write my review on it, and I realized that I just wanted to think about it more and talk about it more. And so I thought that this might act as a kind of part of that review process, or just maybe I'll just use this as the review for it. But I also wanted to talk about cannibalism in general and some of the aspects of the book that I think are kind of interesting, and then we can talk about the book itself. So I thought we would start by talking about the plausibility of the premise. And obviously we're going to have spoilers because we're going to talk about the book. It shouldn't take away from the book because obviously it has its own writing and style and narrative, but we're going to talk about specific aspects and probably talk about the end of the book as well.
I was gonna say, I feel like it's, in terms of spoilers, I feel like the only like really large spoiler is probably the way the book ends, because it ends in a very interesting way. And so the rest of the book I feel like isn't really, it's like if you hear about it, you wouldn't really, I don't think there's not like a plot twist anywhere that would like be ruined by talking about it outside of how the book actually ends. But
yeah, that is definitely something that was surprising and unexpected, but it kind of matters because it changes your perspective on the characters. At least for me, it did drastically, but we can talk about that later.
Well, we do a segment just on the ending where that way if people don't want it to be ruined, they can maybe just skip past.
I thought we should do that at
part of
the
the conversation
when we talk about more like plot points or whatever. But first of all, the kind of main premise of the book is that a virus has swept the world, and the all of the animals, essentially, other than birds, because we can't get a hold of them, but all the animals that we can get a hold of have either died from the virus or we killed all the animals. So there's literally like no dogs, no cats, no cows, no chickens, no horses, all the zoos are out. We went around just murdering all the animals because we were afraid that they were going to kill us, because if we were to get bitten by them, I think we would get hurt, or if we ate their flesh, we would we would die because we would get this virus. And so this is after all of that. Now the only source of protein is from people, and so cannibals, all regular people are cannibals now, and they're not allowed to use that term. There's a whole kind of cultural aspect to it where they don't talk about the people who are being eaten as people, because they are farmed, specifically bred and raised for meat, and there's specific aspects of that
yeah, they call them heads.
Yeah, they call them head, like head,
kind of like a head of cattle, but
yeah, which is a little awkward phrasing wise. He gave me head, stuff like that. That's a little weird, because it's like, wait, is there a blowjob involved, or are you just giving them one like kind animal?
Of a cultural, maybe in I think Argentina, that they don't refer to blowjobs as giving head, so maybe it wasn't a weird thing for her to write.
It's a headache. Hedio. So anyway, that's kind of the main premise and then the main character is he's an inspector for a large farm, one of the most prestigious farm I think in wherever they're at. I guess it's not America. I just imagined it that way.
Yeah,
I'm American.
I don't think they
they
ever
say
explicitly say like this is set in this place. I think it's just
yeah
in a generic setting,
yeah
basically, without an exact location. And like, so for the virus, I remember that being a little bit of a weird thing, because I was like, so the virus is spreading and infecting animals and killing them, but it doesn't spread apparently to people unless, like you were saying, unless they get attacked by the animal, or if they consumed the animal's flesh, then it would actually be fatal to the humans as well. So like humans have like a fear of all the animals now, because there are still like animals around. They haven't like gotten all of them, just most of them. So it's like whenever
yeah
somebody's found to have an animal or whatever, it's like a big deal because it could be carrying this virus that's deadly to humans. And so I wonder, and obviously we're not virologists or epidemiologists, so it's like I wonder if a virus like that could exist like in reality, where like it could just be in the animal population but then also jump to us as a species through, I guess, consumption. Or I mean,
well it doesn't I think it's completely illogical.
Yeah.
It's a
Oh, okay.
hand waving kind of
Just a
thing
way to
that you
set
just
up
have
the
to
premise of the
do.
book. Yeah.
Yeah, there's no like, how do you get it so people are forced to eat people? And the only way she could think of it was to have all the animals be gone. But that a virus, or there's nothing that would, like, we're not different from other animals to a degree that the virus would act differently with us. And so if it's so easily spread from animal to animal and they all somehow get it, which is unprecedented and catastrophic, like that would be the end of all life on Earth. It would also probably affect plants too, because there's no necessary reason why, if it's so fundamentally connected to our DNA, plants have DNA too that isn't like that far removed from us. Why wouldn't it affect that? Like, it would just kill everything. And viruses typically don't kill their hosts immediately. They use their hosts to breed themselves, and then they have a mechanism for moving on to the next host, because viruses have to survive too. So it's just not that simple that it would just be like all the animals die and humans don't.
Well, I wonder if she was approaching it from the aspect where there's a lot of human sicknesses that do not jump to animals. Like COVID, for example. I think there's been like a few cases here and there where they found that like a raccoon had the fucking antibodies or the virus or whatever. But like,
yeah,
there's a lot of human sicknesses that just stay within you. Like if you get the flu or the common cold and you're sneezing in your dog's face, it's not going to get sick. So I'm wondering if she just sort of took that logic, but just applied it backwards, where it's like, well, this is just a thing that's spread amongst animals.
Yeah.
Unless it's like rabies, where they bite you and then you yourself will suddenly, you have to go get the fucking rabies vaccine. So it was a weird thing, but I was like, maybe it's possible, I guess, or it was like, but I think it was more just table setting for the reason why this huge change in society of having to change what we eat. But they also, at one point in the book, somebody kind of plays with this idea and talks about how virulent the virus really was, and if like the animals were even really still sick with it anymore, or if it was just media, these companies that are continuing to say, no, like this virus exists, animals are bad, we need to keep doing this, because it's sort of like that capitalist mentality, right? Where like all these farms have switched to breeding humans for meat, and now if suddenly people realize that animal meat is safe again, like this virus has died off, then suddenly their whole conglomerate will fall apart again, and then they'd have to switch back to, I guess, animals. Also, you would have to deal with the people getting over their fear of eating animals and having animals around again after being so afraid of them for so long. They'd be like you'd have another big cultural shift that you'd have to undergo back to how things were before I think they call it the transition, I think is just what the term is that they put on it.
It seemed like she definitely was using the media as a kind of like all-encompassing catalyst to convince people that this was the way to go. And it was all fear-based, and they just made it seem like they were going to die if we don't get rid of the animals. If we eat them, we're going to die. If they get near us, we're going to die. And I think that what's interesting is that type of persuasion and understanding to be worldwide would have to use a ton of science. There would have to be a ton of obvious scientific research that made that possible, because not everybody's just a sheep and will just go with it. Obviously, if you look at America, like, people don't go with it even when it does make sense. So it would take a lot of convincing but the amount of science and such you would need to understand the problem would be science that you could use to either help solve the problem, or they just didn't have that amount of science. It was just all kind of like crazy, fear. But then they have all this science that allows them to farm and eat people and genetically modify them and do all the stuff that you do in normal farming, but they're applying it to people, which is a high level of science. So it's kind of like we weren't smart enough to come up with interesting solutions to the problem, but we are smart enough to completely create this new industry and genetically modify people so that they're healthy to eat, and so that and then they're using, I mean, humans are a very complicated biological system. Like, we're one of the more complex beings to try to farm, especially with our social nature. It's not, I don't think it's not like cows are super easy. Like, they don't give a shit about nothing. They're super dumb, and you can just herd them and they're there. Humans are violent and smart and like will rebel and do all sorts of things. So it's just an interesting thing that they were able to somehow solve the human problem, but not the virus problem. So I thought it's just kind of like, to me, it's just hand waving. She's just like, okay, this is the way the world is, and we need to accept that for the book. But it kind of makes me like scared to think of a world where we're forced to eat people, where like, can't you just eat, like,
well,
it might not be as good, but you need to eat like, you can eat plants. You don't have to eat meat, technically.
Well, there's a lot of people in the book that they said don't eat the meat at all. Like, they've just become vegan at that point. Like, they just don't, because they can't consume animal products anymore, and they still refuse to eat human meat.
But they didn't make it seem like that was the majority. They made it seem like those people were kind of dumb. Like, those people were kind of like how we think of vegans now.
Yeah, I was going to say it's
kind of a similar thing.
I wouldn't be surprised if the author herself was a vegan, because it seemed in some ways I'm like, oh, this is almost kind of like a not like a manifesto, but like almost like propaganda for why being vegan, is important, because it's like a lot of I think my favorite thing about the story is the use of language, right? Because if you sell something to somebody using certain words that make it seem less horrible than it is, people can stomach that, right? That's why instead of saying this is human meat, they would change it to, like, they would call
special meat.
Yeah, it was special meat.
Yeah.
And then they would do they would call the breeded humans for meat like heads. They weren't calling them people. They didn't treat them like people, because they were literally just breeding these people, and they treated them just like factory farmed animals are treated in our current real day setting. Really, all she did is I feel like, and I've actually thought about this as an idea for a story too. That's why the premise of this story drew me in immediately. Was I've watched the documentaries about factory farming, and it's fucking horrifying. Like, when you watch like the actual things that the animals go through and what they do to them. And then I was like, what if you just took this exact same system and then just put humans in there instead of pigs and, chickens and stuff?
Yeah.
Like,
that's the story.
Suddenly this would be the most horrifying thing in the world for people, because humans set themselves on a pedestal far above any other living creature, really. I mean, we hunt everything in the fucking face of the planet for meat, trophies. Some animals are killed for nothing more than just saying that you got to do it and got a photo op with it. So yeah, like the premise of switching factory farming to humans, I was like, oh, this is immediately something like I've thought about trying to base a story around the same premise. But I think it's like a big part of the story is not only like the capitalism side of it, because now this has become a huge industry, right? The only meat that you can get now is this special meat from these heads that are being factory farmed in all these big organizations. So not only that, but then the language that they suddenly have to adopt in order to make it sound appealing, because cannibalism is still a word that they don't use. They don't call it cannibalism because it's still illegal for you to eat another human. Like, you couldn't just, if your grandma died, you couldn't eat her flesh. That was frowned upon.
You could if she willed it to you, right? So people can will themselves. People who have rights can willfully lay down their life for meat if they want. And it seemed like that was kind of a normal thing for some people to do. And then there was also the church who was, I forget, that didn't seem to go very far, but there was a church in the deal that kept on coming to them to sacrifice people who were willing to do it. And they had signed over their life to get eaten, and it was kind of part of a ritual, but they had to be officially killed and officially slaughtered. So that's why they went to the factory to do it.
But it's like you couldn't just eat people. Like you had to go through these very official, lawful processes.
It's all regulated. Just and it's almost like now, if you like, you can't just have a cow in your backyard. You have to have like the right, land to have it. And if you're going to slaughter it, you have to do it in a particular way. You probably need like permits and stuff like that to have certain types of cattle. I don't know what that looks like in America, but it was just like that, which is the kind of the big premise is putting us into that farmed position. What do we, it both makes us look like, could we do that? Are we capable of treating each other that way? But also that's how we treat other animals. So how does that make you feel if you put yourself into the position of the cow or the chicken or something? Would you like to be treated like that? And I have, I'm not, I have no problem with meat eating. I think it's a totally normal thing. I don't necessarily advocate for factory farming that causes tons of environmental issues, and factory farming that is somewhat needlessly like torturing animals.
Oh yeah,
I didn't watch those documentaries, and I don't know if that's all the practices. Obviously there's tons of different factories and different regulations and different ways of doing it. I don't think it's all horrific. I do think that cows seem to be a kind of inefficient system in that they take up so much land and water and food that they're almost like kind of a luxury meat, and they're one of the least healthy meats for people, it seems. So that's kind of something I think people should deal with.
It takes approximately over about 1,800 gallons of water to produce 1 pound of beef, because of how much water it takes to not only water the land for them to eat and graze off of, and then the water that they drink. So yeah, that was always an interesting statistic that like really sticks out
till they're older.
When we hit this point, because like they talk about how we're going to be in a water crisis within the next probably 30 or 40 years because of infrastructure issues, where like a lot of cities have really old sewage systems that are leaking water constantly, and then you got factory farming that's like using
lots of it,
thousands and thousands of gallons of water to produce very minuscule amounts of meat in comparison. But
these are all like like scientific and agricultural problems that I think are totally solvable, and we'll solve them or we'll die. So I mean, what are the whatever.
Yeah, a lot of it's just like
not worried about it.
Repairing and rebuilding infrastructure for a lot of the systems, but
and it'll happen, and people put money into it when they need to, or I mean, we're not good. People in general are not great at planning ahead.
No, we're just good at reacting.
So we react, and that works for the most part, and it's not necessarily as efficient, and there's loss and risk involved in that strategy, but it happens, and that's the way it goes.
But so and the other thing too is like, so cannibalism is still frowned upon, right? But also you like with the special meat that they're breeding for the heads, like they don't treat them in humans. It's so much like it's illegal for you to have like a sexual encounter with one of them, even though they are still technically human beings. Like that's like, isn't it like grounds for them to also just be slaughtered? I think like that's like a lot of the punishment for
that's for a lot
things
of like
is like you would just get slaughtered, and
that is yourself. One of the main, that's like the execution, the end is like, if you commit a crime that's bad enough, you will be slaughtered and eaten, because they're like so low on meat. They're also, the population in the book has gone down dramatically because so many people died from the virus, and the transition period, like people just died, that which is also kind of an interesting thing to think about. If you're worried about population and yet you're eating people. Like, you're lowering the population. You could use those people as people and increase your population. But I guess without the meat to eat, the population's a problem anyway. So it's this weird.
It gets to a point where they're
situation.
Not even humans, right? Like they did, because they don't educate them. They literally are just born in these factories and raised in their meat, and like, so I feel like they dehumanize them to such a scale, and that's how a lot of people are able to stomach eating them, is I think in their minds they're not even like really people anymore.
But and with the females, it reminded me of Bone Tomahawk, where they cut their arms off so that they can't hurt themselves, because the females will hurt themselves. But they would still look like people. Like, they're still humans. I mean, even if they cut all their hair off, they still look like people. They have faces, and faces are very salient features. They're features that allow us to identify each other and understand emotion. And so one of the other problems I have with the premise is the idea that you can just take a human and like raise them in like on their own with no, like, because the way you would raise like a cow would be like actually fairly naturalistic in non-factory farms, I guess, where it would give birth, they'd live on the field, and they would grow old with their parents and eat the food, right? That's like a normal cow life. But in a factory farm, I don't know if that's the case. They give birth. I don't know if they have interactions with their parents, if they just are by themselves.
Well, a lot of factory farms, they take the baby, they keep some of the baby cows to raise, and then they take other ones away because they constantly keep the female cows pregnant to keep producing milk. And so then they basically tear the babies away from the mothers, and then the babies that they take, they turn into like veal or like the baby cow meat. That's veal, right?
Yeah, it's veal.
Okay.
But veal isn't a really popular thing, and there must be tons of babies. So they're obviously not making all the babies into veal. They're probably mostly just taking them and raising them separately.
Well, they also pump them full of a lot of different growth hormones. I know that's really common.
They grow fast. And that's
like the issue with like the issue with like chickens in real factory farming is that they grow so fast and they get so large with meat, because that's the idea, right? Is you're trying to get as much meat out of this animal as possible. And so they literally, the chickens can't walk because their legs cannot bear the how quickly they grow physically. And so I'm sure they do the same thing for cows. They probably just growth hormones in the feed and shit that they're using to get them to grow and get as much meat on their bodies as quickly as they can.
So if you apply that to people, I don't think it works particularly well because of multiple reasons. But for one, you'd have to keep them away from any language ever, because they would learn language. We learn language naturally. You don't have to try. You'd have to keep them away from their parents, or they like, regardless of language and whether your vocal cords are cut out, which they do to these people, people are fucking very intelligent. Like we learn quickly regardless of the circumstances. And unless they dumbed them down with drugs, which I don't remember them talking about, or with like lobotomies, which would make way more sense. If you had lobotomized them from birth, that would solve a lot of these problems that I'm coming up with here, because then they would just be like fucking mindless. But it didn't seem like they were like that. It seemed like they were just dumb because they didn't have education.
Well, I think a combination of that and then fear, right? Like they don't treat them very well. So I feel like the writer, the author gets like tries to explain away, because I was kind of thinking the same thing. I was like, if you have so many of these people gathered together in these horrible circumstances, your survival instinct would be to create a coalition amongst yourselves, even though you can't communicate with words. Like you would find a way
I think they would
to get together. And so I was like, I feel like the idea is that not only are they dumb, unable to vocally speak, but they also are just so afraid that they can't do anything.
I think one of the only ways to do that is to isolate them from each other and keep them somewhat penned up individually. But babies can't do that. You can't do that with human babies. Babies that don't get attention and touch will die. And so like a lot of them will die. Like maybe a few of them will live and they'll have major developmental issues. But humans are just, you can't just like leave them in the hay. Like they also need to be, like babies need to be cared for, like some way. They need to be, protected from dangers. They can't walk, they can't do anything, and you have to feed them. So I guess they didn't go into that. And that's one of the questions I would have for that system is, if you did that, how do you do that with robots? Because if you did that with any people, they would immediately become infatuated with these babies. They'd fall in love with them. You couldn't do that. And then people would want to protect their own babies. Like, it would become a very complex situation to deal with the childhood development of these farmed humans.
Yeah.
That's not like any other animal, in my opinion, based on things that I know and how, like, people would fight back, and they can deal with that. I'm sure it's not an implausible situation that we would kill people and keep them in things. It would just be very difficult, I think, because I think people would rebel, or they become so antisocial. They become if you hit children enough, they become very like psychopathic, and they would just kill each other. They would, like, you wouldn't be able to have them near each other. They'd all have to be separated, because if you put them near each other, you would have little psychopathic head who are going around fucking figuring out ways to murder each other, and eat each other. I don't see why that wouldn't happen.
And
like chimpanzees in certain zoo-like situations will just murder each other because they
so
do
pigs and factory farms will do that too. If they're not getting enough feed or whatever, they'll just kill each other and eat the other ones. I wonder too if they keep them under control in a way that's kind of like playing off the idea of slavery, right? In America, well, slavery in general, how do you keep these large groups of slaves from just forming an uprising against you, right? Because I'm sure there's examples of it, I'm sure, in history that have happened, where slaves finally got sick of it, they fucking banded together and overthrew their slave masters. But generally speaking, especially in in American history, that I don't think there was really much of a slave uprising. They just sort of were slaves, and they just tried to get by as best they could.
Individuals would run away, and that was very punished very heavily. Probably most of them got killed. But that's the other thing, is they're also a valuable source, so that you have to really manage them and not just kill them. So it's an interesting problem. Like, animals are just so much easier to deal with. We've been doing it forever. We bred them specifically for docility. Humans are just not bred that way. We're bred for, cooperation with our local group, and then violence toward others that stop us. And so it's a complex thing to think about. I was going to talk about that sex thing too, because I think that goes into a class kind of situation, because the really, really, really rich people that we learn about in the book, kind of openly talk about how they would pay to have sex with the farmed females, but we also find out that, like, normal everyday people couldn't get away with that. They would get caught. Their wife would tell on them. There wasn't a society of like prostitution. And then what's crazy is the rich people would have sex with them really violently. This one guy who we were, disgusted by in the book, but he would also kill and eat them afterward, and that was like a big power move to do, which I think is like a huge just kind of like exaggeration of the powerful capitalistic kind of concept, which is that the people at the very top do whatever they want. Doesn't matter what laws are happening. They have enough money and power and influence that they can do all the horrible, immoral, unethical things. And in this world, humans are trafficked in ways that just makes that so much easier and so much and then it's acceptable because of their because they're horrible people anyway.
Well, I feel like a lot of these rules are based around this guise of civility, right? Like, oh, we're civilized. Like, these are specifically for eating, for our survival. That's why we're not fucking them. We're not doing all this stuff because that's immoral. That's dirty, blah, blah, blah. So it's like, I feel like even though some of like those wealthier characters like talk about all this stuff, it's like, it's not publicly done, or it's publicly frowned upon under this facade of like, oh, this is the civil world. Like, we don't do these things with the farm animals. Like, and that kind of goes back to them just completely dehumanizing them in so much that they don't even consider them Homo sapiens. They're just fucking farm animals at this point.
Which I think is interesting, because killing people is like kind of one of the worst things you could do. Raping people is like very close. But if you're going to enslave a group of people for your own economic and survival benefit, and it's in a modern world where we justify all sorts of things with technologies. Why not? I don't know why the sex part would be weird. Like if they made the females sterile, I don't get why the food part got justified and the sex part didn't. I guess because that's the way it was. But
I think it's also a look
it's
back.
just interesting.
Going back to like slavery again, it would be frowned upon for you to have had sex
but
with
not
any
if
of
you
your
owned
slaves, even though it was done.
I think the slave owners could do
But
whatever they want.
Publicly speaking, it'd be like, oh, you did
but
what?
The slave owners were the rich people. They weren't normal people. The vast majority of people in America did not own slaves. Yeah. It was the rich not capitalists, but
plantation
industrialists.
Owners and
the industrialists. There'd be like one in a city, and he would be it owned tons of land and would have slave own, but he could do whatever he wanted. Like I don't think that they had any problems with sex with their slaves. I think the only reason we care about sex with slaves is because of the hypocrisy of certain people like Jefferson and stuff, who had slaves and spoke against slavery, but also had children with slaves. But the children part, I think, was not taboo in any way back then. But it is in the book. And I think that's interesting because it's like they created these rules that just replaced animals. And because we can't have sex with animals, but there's a whole set of totally separate reasons why we don't have sex with animals. Like that's not that taboo is not related to the same taboo as not killing people or killing animals. Like that's different. But we can't have sex with people. So it's just an interesting kind of just thing to accept in the book, is that that's looked down on and such. But I think that at some point, if you're going to use them as a product, then that seems totally justifiable. Like they're just a product, and a product could be used, for any purpose, that's viable, economic. And it would even, potentially mean that they're treated differently and more and better, if they're just sex slaves. I don't, maybe they aren't at least murdered, and while they're being raped, they would have actual connections with people in a different way than just being murdered, I guess. Because, I mean, even though it sounds horrible, but at some point, like, people fall in love with prostitutes and would treat them differently, because, men are not all just connect. Not all men are trying to like murder and rape women. That's just not natural. That's not like what we're thinking. Obviously you could normalize more of that in that society, but the main character, is struggling with the whole concept, because he lived before the transition, and he's kind of our perspective into
like a cipher kind of.
He's our connection to the our reality into that world, because it would be hard to get behind a character that's just okay with all of it. You need someone who's more like us. And I'm really sorry, I gotta take a break. I'm sorry. I'm trying to hold it, and the second the thing starts going, I made it about an hour. That's not terrible.
Oh, okay. Wow.
I'm gonna have to take a break. I don't know. Maybe you could do what you do, whatever you do while I do these
whatever
things.
I do. I thought you listen to this. I thought you listen to me.
No, I do, but I don't.
Okay.
I don't.
Go for it. Go.
I'm sorry.
Go do your potty break. Pontificate a little bit more on the book
I don't know.
while you pee.
Yeah.
Every time, you guys. Every time we get left alone because this guy can't hold his fluids inside his body. Anyway, hopefully you guys are enjoying this conversation. It's a very good story. I recommend everybody read it. It is heavy, though. I will tell you that. It is not. I mean, I'm sure as you've been listening to this conversation, it's a heavy subject matter. But it's interesting to explore a society and ideas that are so morosely different from our own, like so much so that we couldn't even fathom the possibility we were just eating human beings on a grand scale. I don't think we'll ever see that happening. I mean, usually that's reserved for like post-apocalyptic stories where there is no choice but to eat other people because there's nothing else to eat. But not in this case, you just go vegan if you can't eat meat. Really, all of us should be adopting more vegan lifestyles anyway. I'm not saying go full vegan, but we all eat way too many animal products. That's why we have health problems as much as we do, especially in America. We are a country full of people with diabetes and shit, and it's because our diets suck. Got to eat a lot more fruits and vegetables, ladies and gentlemen. That is the key. You can't just have, sausage and eggs every day for breakfast, and then a big old fat deli turkey sandwich for lunch every day, and a steak with buttery potatoes. If you eat that shit every day, it's gonna take a toll. That's all I'm saying. Throw some vegetables and fruit in there, okay? I mean, by all means, eat the meat that you want to eat. Just tone it down. Why am I giving a PSA on attempting to try to not really go vegan, but strip it back a little bit? Oh, I actually went vegan I did it for about 6 months. It was interesting. It was very tough. There's a cultural aspect to that, along with just like your cravings for animal products, especially when you have lived your whole life consuming them. But suddenly when you're trying not to eat any of that stuff, and then you're hanging out with friends or you have family that are not adopting a vegan lifestyle alongside you, it makes it almost impossible actually to really maintain, because everywhere you go, you can't usually eat most of the things that they have on offer because there's fucking milk in it or something. But I encourage everybody to try going vegan for a short time to challenge yourself and see if you can do it, and see, you'll explore some new food options that you never realized probably existed. I know I did. Sorry, I didn't know what to talk about. I suddenly started going into a little bit of a vegan PSA.
Oh, really? Are you vegan now?
No, I did it for about 6 months.
Oh, that's
a couple of years ago. Yeah. Wow. It was interesting. But I was actually going to talk about that once we got to because there's a part of the story, like, right, because they sort of gloss over the vegan thing. They're like, oh, a lot of people went vegan and don't eat the meat, but then more people stuck to eating meat, and I think that's just probably a reflection of our own society, because vegans exist, but then especially in America, this is a country that's like founded on farming, and so like our whole culture is built around consuming meat and eggs and milk and butter and getting diabetes, basically.
Yeah, it's kind of like
inflammation issues and clogged arteries.
We would totally be willing to push aside our problems with cannibalism in a circumstance where it was either that or eating meat. And we're so unwilling to change that we're like, fuck it, let's just farm humans. I think it's an interesting idea.
Well, I think it's true. I think it would honestly, like, obviously the circumstances to get to a point where we're farming humans is like crazy, yeah,
out there.
But if like we somehow ended up in those circumstances, I think that's what I enjoyed about this book, is I was like, I feel like it's the sad kind of dark side to humanity, but a lot of people would probably do it because there are so many people who are like ingrained in their like cultural beliefs where they're like, no, I'm like, I eat meat. Like, that's what I do. I need to eat meat, blah, blah, blah. And so I feel like people would adopt eating meat. They would, but as long as they use the right language, that this is special meat, or they'd throw some kind of term on it. They don't call veal dead baby cow meat. They call it veal because
they should very totally call it that.
Simple. If you went into the store and instead it was, it didn't say steak on the package, it said, dead cow hindquarter skinned on this date. I feel like some people would be less appealing. It would be less appealing. There's a whole thing on one of the documentaries I watched about veganism, where there's like a whole, not industry, but like there's a whole sect devoted to packaging and making meat appealing in the store, because it helps you disconnect the fact that the thing that's sitting there that you're purchasing was like a live living creature that probably suffered a lot before it died if it was factory farmed. Like, all we see is this very nice cut of steak in this very organized plastic package that you're just going to go home and throw in a frying pan or on your barbecue or whatever.
I think that people are definitely disconnected. And if they just, if they never saw what was going on with these people in the book, all they did was go to the store and they can still eat meat. A ton of people would absolutely do that. I've no problem believing that people would do that. It's just, how does it get to that point where they start to disconnect, and where, because there would have been a point where there's no meat in the supermarket, they would have to deal with that, because it's not like they went straight to eating people. This was like a long, like, coordinated effort with the government involved to like regulate it and legalize it and all that stuff. So it's pretty complicated how you would get to that point, but it's a kind of comment on our disconnection from meat. But I mean, we're disconnected from everything when it comes to food anyway. Like, most people don't know how to farm or where food comes from. They don't know what's going on inside of their food. We eat fast food like it's healthy for us, you know.
We just get annoyed that we have to take 30 minutes out of our day to go to the grocery store and grab all this stuff and then pay for it.
Well, and a lot of young people don't even do that. Like almost everyone I know that's like under 25 just goes out for almost every meal. They just, or they still live at home and they eat, you know, one meal at home.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, I know a lot of, I work with younger people in retail, and a lot of them are just kind of like, they just eat whatever. Like, it doesn't, it's not like something they're worried about at this point because they're young.
Well, they will be in about 20 years.
I did the same thing.
Falling apart.
I ate, fast food, and fast food's super tasty, and it's cheap and it's easy, and you can throw away the wrapper and you're done. And I think that's partly a really, really good aspect of modern life, is our ability to have excess food and accessibility for people to get food. People don't starve in America. They definitely starve in other places for all sorts of reasons, but that's not really what we're talking about. But we're not in trouble of having to resort to cannibalism in America. If anything, we are overly overweight and unhealthy regarding high blood pressure, obesity.
Well, we waste a lot of food too. We throw away tons and literally tons and tons of food probably daily that just goes to waste. That wasn't sold in time or whatever.
Yeah, for sure.
Especially with meat, if you have raw, fresh meat, it's only good for maybe a week or two after it's been slaughtered. So it's kind
of like how much can you just use these resources until you start to run into real scarcity, and we just haven't really gotten there yet, so we don't know how to deal with it. So it's interesting. One of the things I wanted to bring up, which is to me a huge problem with the premise, which is it's called Kuru or prion disease, which is a very real problem with eating human flesh, which the book glosses over in like one sentence, which is something about like it's essentially like the biologists and scientists figured out that it was really just a myth and that's really not a problem, which in real life would be a real problem, and you would have to solve it. And I think you could through science. I think you could figure out ways of treating humans with certain things to probably get rid of it.
I just always assumed that it had to do with like the special feed that they gave them and stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Like that was kind of how I wrapped it around in my mind. I was like, oh, they probably created some formula of stuff in the feed.
The problem with it is it's not like a normal disease where it comes from like bacteria. It's prion disease comes from the when you eat typically the brain of a human. If you eat it, then you will have a very good chance that you're going to get this problem. And what happens is the proteins from the brain get into your body, and then they fuck up the proteins inside your body, and the proteins are essentially unfold, and it typically affects your like balance, and a lot of times you'll like start slurring and start not being able to walk straight, and then very soon you'll end up dying because it'll affect your brain and put big holes in your brain. So it's actually like a really prevalent issue of people who eat brains of humans who are human.
Don't eat the brain.
And that I think would be one of the main solutions. Now it doesn't, because it's a protein problem and it's typically neurological cells that are in your brain. You have neurocells all over your body, so you would also have to look out for those. And so there's still a chance that you could get it from other cells in the body, but it's much less likely. There was like a tribe that this guy was studying, and what he found was that these females kept on getting this disease, but nobody else was getting it. And what he figured out is that in that tribe, one of their cultural practices was that the females at a funeral would consume the brains of the deceased as a kind of ritual. It wasn't like they killed them and then ate them. This was part of their death ritual. Mm-hmm. Normal funeral type thing. But it was only the women who ate the brains. They would end up every once in a while giving little pieces to their kids. So the kids would end up getting it. And it takes years for this disease to show itself. So it can take 10, 20 years for you to start seeing symptoms of it. So I guess whatever, live a little while for it. But that's one of the things that is a problem with cannibalism.
Because I guess I don't remember if they state how long people have been somewhat regularly consuming the human meat at this point in the story.
It's hard to say.
Because Marcos, who's the main character, like you said, he was alive before the transition and then after. So it bears to reason that this whole process has probably taken place maybe over the last 20 years, roughly.
Maybe 30.
Depending on how old he is.
Yeah.
And so I was like, that would be an interesting like sequel to the story, is suddenly everybody's developing prion disease because it's 20 years after this process has started.
Dealt with it very well.
And then it just becomes a whole other cultural problem.
Well, and then people would just be dying at a even larger rate, and then there'd be less people, more fear, and then who knows what happened. I mean, especially if you have no food source that's readily available. But
I think though, in terms of people adopting, like there would be definitely people I think who would, because they would find a way to market it to make it more appealing for people to eat it. But I think that even more people would probably just go vegan, because
I think so. Yeah, absolutely.
Because being vegan isn't that tough, especially nowadays, because of the amount of synthetic meats and things that have been created, like Beyond Meat and
that's a thing like now. So
like those things exist now. And like that was a lot of the stuff that I kind of switched to when I first started trying out like the vegan diet, was like, instead of buying a steak, I would just go buy like a couple of Beyond Meat patties. And so it was like for dinner, instead of having a steak, I would just toast one of those up. Tofu is another big one. There's like these substitutes, which in all honesty aren't obviously as good as like the real thing, but like Beyond Meat especially is so fucking close. Like I feel like you could actually trick people into thinking that it was a weird kind of unique meat, maybe like lamb or something that people don't eat on a regular basis, that maybe don't know how it tastes. Like you could probably cook one of those and be like, oh, it's a lamb burger. And if somebody's never had that, they'd be like, oh, okay, this is pretty good.
But, well, you have to think about a society that has gone through massive trauma, and where the population has been decimated by this issue. We don't know much about that in the book because we're kind of just looking at his life, but supposedly you would have people who would be so happy to eat that Beyond Meat because it's in all, like, because of watching everyone die. Like as you're watching everyone die and you're trying to live in a new world where like there aren't people, like just life would just be totally different with that type of massive reduction in population. You just have less people doing all the normal jobs that we do. You would have to focus on the main jobs, which would now be farming plants. You'd have to really figure that out because you need those more than ever. And then you would need plants that are high in protein so that you can, because I would assume meat would be expensive in this new world. Actually, it seemed like it actually was pretty expensive.
It's kind of more of a
luxury item. Especially if you had your own head, right? If you like personal, you could like get a permit for it. So it's just it's kind of interesting to think that it just would be a totally different world, which is one of the things I think is interesting about kind of the justification for this is like, this is not just us eating people. It's a world that has gone through massive amounts of trauma where people have to band together to try to solve this issue. And historically, we're able to make these really, really bad, seemingly bad decisions, immoral acts, because the big group kind of allows it. And it reminds me of like Nazi Germany, where because of all these traumatic circumstances and this horrible economic issues and these wars that went on in Germany, the people of Germany sort of just went with the crowd, and most of them accepted the circumstances at the beginning of World War II, where it was mostly about, rebuilding their country and standing up for themselves. And then soon it became about, world domination, and they found out that they were murdering Jews at crazy rates. And I think that's when the German people had to start dealing with more issues. But at first, like, people always say it's really like I wouldn't do that. And if I was in Germany, I wouldn't do that, but you would. Everyone did. Like, it's an experiment in what happens when a whole country does something somewhat, it became more immoral later, but I'm trying to like mix the history up. I think at first it was just like a normal, like, shitty warfare situation.
Well, it's almost like a survival thing.
Yeah, that's society, what I'm saying,
right? Like, if you go against the entire grain of everybody,
you're not going to live.
You put yourself and your family in danger. So it's like you go along with it, not necessarily because you believe it, but because you're scared.
Well, and it builds over time. Yeah. It's not like you're just like, hey, now we're going to eat people. It builds with all of these traumatic circumstances, and then survival instincts and media, and then the government doing things. And then and then later you find out, like, oh my God, I can't believe what I'm doing. And I think that that's what this is kind of reflection of, is like what we do in apocalyptic circumstances is not the same as what we do in modern wealthy times, which is kind of what you have to put yourself into, which takes some time. Because when I was reading the book, the very beginning of the book, it goes very deep into graphic detail about how they slaughter people. And it was unnerving. It was genuinely emotionally unnerving to read. But as I kept reading and getting more into the characters, I just accepted it. Yeah, I just accepted it. I was like, oh, this is just, these are like animals. They're a separate kind of group of things. But then it also brings you back at the end, and it goes, oh, no, they're not. They're really people. And you're like, oh, shit, there's more. It brings you back to the kind of turmoil at the beginning, because it's a really well-crafted book. Maybe we can go, in the last bit of this, just talk about the book, its writing, and the end of the book, because I don't know.
Well, I'm just curious. I want to ask you one thing, right?
Yeah,
well, do that. Obviously, it's hard to answer because we're not in the circumstances of the book. But let's say this all happened, right? This is the world we live in now. Do you think that you would be somebody who would eventually like try eating whatever they labeled the new human meat, the special meat, or do you think? Like, I think for me, I would probably just adopt the vegan lifestyle, only because I've done it before. And I think that if you didn't have those options staring you in the face, like when you go to the grocery store, right? Or you're going to a friend's house, if you go to a friend's house who's not vegan, they obviously have a lot of refreshments and things that are not vegan. So it makes it very difficult for you to stick to that very strict diet, because all these other delicious things are at your disposal. And then say when you go to the store, right, they have all these animal products everywhere. But I feel like if all that was gone now and was replaced with whatever, special meat is, or, everything else, I feel like for me, I would probably just go vegan, because especially if the synthetic meats and things like that were still available. I'm wondering if maybe in Argentina, that's not a very big market like it is in America. The fake meat vegan or whatever food, the vegan stuff, because now there's like whole sections in the grocery store and I've noticed them growing over the last few years. So I'm wondering if that's like a kind of one of those cultural holdovers from this being written by somebody from a different country. And so maybe like that's something that's just not even a part. So like it's easier in Argentina for people to have adopted just consuming human meat, because they don't have as many alternative options available.
Well, and I don't know when this was written. I think it's fairly recently.
It was written. It was recent. It was 2017 is when it came out originally, and then it was translated in 2020. So it came out in America last year.
So it's not like the 80s or something. Yeah, it's interesting. I think that's probably a little bit more accurate, because when she's writing it, it's more from her perspective, and American writing this story would have to deal with the whole, like, why don't they just go vegan part more than she did. I think what I would have an issue with if I was in the circumstances is the information that I had. And if I didn't get any information on the negative aspects of any of this stuff, and it was all positive and it was all marketing and propaganda, I might do it, because I think at some point I would just accept that everyone's okay with it. It's a part of the new world that I'm living in. I think that I'm more of a crowd person than I want to think I am. Like, I think of myself as this big independent person, but I don't think that's actually true.
That's true for most people.
I think that's I think it's a bit of a delusion to think that you're that capable of withstanding the pressure of society. I'm definitely more of like an introvert, but that doesn't mean I'm not like massively influenced by all the people around me. I also think that it would be if there was counter media, like there was like, because I think what would happen is there would be a massive group of people who were protesters, and they would be constantly looking for reasons to show video footage and photos of the way people are treated, and that would make this whole thing very difficult.
Yeah, with documentaries like Dominion and things like that. Like those are all people protesting and trying.
And a lot of them get in a lot of trouble and do illegal stuff to get that, and they would do that in this society. But this society, I think there's a totally big difference between the empathy we feel for animals and the empathy we feel for humans. I think that we nearly immediately feel empathy for humans in struggling circumstances if we're a normal person that isn't sociopathic. But we don't feel that for animals in the same degree. I think we do feel it at a certain degree, but that isn't as evolutionarily beneficial. It isn't massively beneficial for us to be worried about animal suffering, but it is for human suffering because we just have this innate built-in mechanism for it. So if I were to see all these, people with their arms cut off and they're, in the way that they're killed, I think most people would have like a natural revulsion to that because they're people, not just because they're being eaten. It would be the shared empathy because they're humans. I think that that's a part of our psychology. And then I think with animals, you really have to kind of push it to feel that same level of empathy. Like, obviously kicking a dog, but if you kick a dog in the right circumstances, it's totally justifiable because it was attacking you or because of whatever reason. It's kind of similar to like, it's kind of justifiable. Like, we want to talk about murder as a universal no, but if they murder the right person, it's totally acceptable to most people because they were a horrible person or something, or a serial killer. So the justifications matter. And I don't think that food is a big enough justification for, slaughtering human beings and treating them like cattle. That's me now. Obviously, if I grew up in a different society, I'd be totally different. We definitely adapt to our circumstances, and
that's the thing too. It just get easier over time, right? Like every generation that this world existed.
Oh yeah.
If you were born into this world, you would know no difference.
Well,
you're like, oh, this is just what we eat.
And they address that with when he encounters those kids at the zoo, and they're just completely like unempathetic toward animals, and you assume that's because of their interactions with this circumstance. Like they've grown up to hate animals, to fear them, and to think that they're going to kill you. So of course they hate animals. They didn't grow up loving animals like Marcos did, and so they're like killing puppies and all that stuff. And I think that they would treat those head of humans as that separate category much easier than anybody else, because they are separate, because they're treated differently, because they're not even seeing them very often. So I think we adapt to our environment, and it's not that there's like morals and ethics change with that environment, and we tend to justify things after the fact. We like to think of ourselves as principled, but I don't think we are that brave. We just do what we think is best in the moment, and then we sort of justify it later with things that make it so that our ego can handle it and that we don't feel like we're horrible people. And that doesn't always work, because our conscience, this little, developed morality that we get very early on, can haunt us later as we're adults making difficult decisions that we didn't necessarily have preparation for earlier. So that's why a lot of times people feel guilty for things they do as an adult. It's because they have this preset value condition that they're not living up to, but that was ingrained early on and didn't really encapsulate the really complex things you deal with as an adult. These like black and white morality things that you get taught as you're a kid. So that would be different depending on the circumstances, which is a whole cultural kind of variable that people deal with.
Yeah.
But that's why this kind of a book is really cool, because it kind of forces you to deal with a morality that you're not comfortable with. And that's why you can have new conversations about, eating people, which is kind of interesting, because it's very similar to like why I think zombies are very, very appealing, because it sort of justifies killing people in a way that gets at to a kind of primal violence that we have anyway. Like when we hate people, we see them as another, as a monster, kill them, and zombies just give you that easy out to like just murder people like crazy.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that's what zombies are, is kind of like a stand-in for our desire to throttle people, at a primal level. When society really doesn't let us do that, and we've become more civil, and obviously that's wonderful. I'm glad that we are,
right,
but we still have these instincts that we're fighting against all the time. And this book is kind of like the other side of the zombie coin. Instead of zombies trying to kill and eat us, we're purposefully breeding people to eat, which is like us being the zombies. But if we eat brains, we get prion disease. So you got to be careful.
Don't want that. No.
Which is why zombies are like the opposite. Like they need the disease to keep them alive, maybe.
Well, and cannibalism is an interesting thing, because there's, not a lot, but there are still tribes and stuff that practice it to this day. And like, supposedly, it's easy, I think, for people to just view that as like a heinous, evil thing. But again, it becomes like this cultural thing where it's like, well, these are, this is their beliefs. It's their ceremony. It's, whatever reason they have for doing it. Like, it's all they know. And a lot of those tribes that do that are very like isolated and don't have a lot of interaction with the outside world.
They've been doing it for a long time.
Yeah, there was like that. It was like years ago, that Christian guy who tried to go to that tribe to like spread Christianity, and they ended up fucking killing him. Like they shot him with like arrows, and they found his body like on the beach or whatever after he snuck over there on a boat.
Well, and also animals, engage in cannibalism quite often. A lot of animals do it. I know chimpanzees do it, and lions, and almost every probably cat species ever, because they'll just eat fucking anything anyway. I'm sure birds do it. All sorts of different animals.
Well, especially, in desperate times, I don't think a lion would probably eat another lion if it had antelope plentifully available to chase down and eat. I feel like it's maybe things are tough, and so
that can be the case, I think, for sure. And I think that's like one half of like the justification for cannibalism is like you need to eat, and so you do. Like,
well, that's usually how we justify it in stories and films, right?
Yeah, usually for people, that's the only
good moral character has to put those morals to rest to survive, and has to eat.
One of the other cannibalisms in nature is infanticide, where you kill a rival male's baby because fuck them. You're going to be your genes are more important. And obviously they're not thinking that, but like a lot of times animals will kill the babies of other males like right when they're born, because they are the dominant one. So they're able to fight off that other male, and then they'll kill the baby, which will put the female back into receptibility of becoming pregnant again within, probably 24 hours or whatever, as it stops milking and it knows the baby's. I don't know how that works biologically, but
I think I heard that women are actually most fertile shortly after giving birth.
Maybe that's what's doing that. I remember they're getting rid of the baby so that they can mate again.
Because I remember a friend of my mom, she had a kid and then literally was pregnant within like, I think 6 months.
Yeah, that's true. Because people do
7
have
months after
babies like right next to each other.
Yeah, and I was speaking that her doctor had told her that women are typically most fertile after giving birth. So that's why a lot of people have children in pretty rapid succession.
It might have to do with the massive hormone, like the gestation hormones are also the hormones for getting pregnant. So as you're, ramping up toward birth, you're getting all these hormones that are also going to help.
It's probably like a biological thing, right? Like your body has a child and it's like, okay, we got to like produce as many of these as we can.
Well, because it also couldn't have a child beforehand.
Yeah.
While you're pregnant, you can't get pregnant. So, which take the advantage of that. But anyway, that's just another version of cannibalism, is when an animal kills the young of another, of someone that it's not their young. And sometimes they kill their own young too. Like that just happens. I know hyenas, when they're born,
dude, fuck those things.
They immediately start killing each other.
Yeah.
And like I don't know if it probably has nothing to do with food. It just has to do with their fucking crazy biology.
Dude, those things are terrifying. They just like piss on themselves and all kinds. Like they're just the most
and they have
they
have a matriarchal society where the female grows like an extended clitoris that is like, and the females are bigger and they're fucking violent and they dominate over the males and they're crazy. I mean, fuck that. I don't want to live in that world where chicks have huge clits and they fucking beat you to death and they're bigger than you. Can you imagine with such a society?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Oh man. Suck my dick. Clit,
yeah, like the whole time I was reading this book, like, because I feel like it's designed to be morally shocking, right? That all this is happening. But in my mind, as I was reading, and I think maybe it's because I've seen a few documentaries on factory farming, I was like, this isn't that horrifying to me, only because all she's done is she took what is happening today in factory farming and just swapped out the creature that's in the system, basically. So it was like, it was fascinating to read, but I feel like it didn't hit me. And I felt like the heaviness of it, like it's a heavy read. It's very, like you said, the whole maybe first third of the book or so is really focused on the process, like of what they do with them and how they slaughter them and all this stuff. And the whole time they're talking about them, they're just talking about them like they're farm animals. And I'm like, you could convince yourself almost that they're not even humans, that they're just talking about how they're slaughtering pigs or cows or whatever. But then I think the story, like, oh god, I forgot where I was going with this. Anyway, but I think it just didn't hit me as hard, because I was like, yeah, this is what we do to living creatures now. And for some reason we just think like humans are out of the food chain, basically. And so we've just assigned ourselves to be better and superior to like every other living thing. So everything under us is under our thumb and our dominion. And so what, it's only sad because if something came along that suddenly dominated us and started doing to us what we do to living creatures now, then suddenly it would become horrifying because it's happening to our own species. Like if an alien fucking race beamed down from space and then just started doing this exact same thing to us and needed us for food or fucking whatever resource that they would farm us for. Then suddenly it's horrifying, but it's fine right now that we do it to.
But that story would be 100% about rebellion, right? It would be about us rebelling against the aliens, which they somehow solved in this society. The farm animals don't really rebel. They don't even barely run away because they're so just like beaten down, which is whatever. But kind of like cows, like a lot of times you let them loose, they don't go anywhere. They're just like happy to be on the ground, eating grass. But that one of the reasons why I think it's not as personally compelling and horrific is because they actually dehumanize them. There's no head in this book that in any way resembles a normal human. And that brings us to the end of the book where
I was gonna say that would lead into like
the girl,
the second
to the
kind
female.
Of third where Jasmine is, he gives her a name and everything.
And it sort of leads you down this like humanizing path where she starts to learn how to wear clothes. She starts to like hug him and kiss him. And then, he has sex with her and presumably more than once. And you think what's going to happen is like, she's going to be the last hope for these fucking farmed animals. Even if she never interacts with any of them, she is going to live a life that's somewhat better than the others. And that doesn't end up happening. And you kind of find out that he's kind of a hypocrite. At least that's how I got it. Is I was like, at the very end, I kind of hated him again, like, or for the first time. When I kind of liked him throughout most of it, I was kind of like rooting for him. Whereas at the end, I was like, oh, fuck him. He's just another dude who's using these creatures, who doesn't really care about them, who kind of acts, who thinks he does, but doesn't really, and ends up just sort of using her at the end.
Well, I guess we should put we kind of already on it, but like big spoilers here. So like if people don't
Yeah,
want that towards the end
we're
to
in the
be
end of
really,
this.
really ruined, but just maybe skip ahead 20 minutes or something.
Yeah.
But so the end was surprising to me, but also at the same time, like when I sat with it for a little bit, I was like, I feel like maybe like so part of his personal plot, right, is that he was married to a woman named Cecilia. They had they had tried to have a child. They finally had one. Their son named Leo. Sorry, I have the little character list here pulled up. I don't actually remember all these names. But then the child died during infancy. I don't remember if they state if he
It's
just
while he
died
was
of
sleeping, which is typically sudden death
like
syndrome.
a crib death kind of thing.
Yeah, sudden infant death.
Yeah,
SIDS.
and then the loss of this child that they had been. I think they talk about how they were using all these different
fertility
for
drugs.
fertility therapies and things like that, and it was a very expensive process, and then it finally paid off for them. And then when they lost him, it basically fractured their marriage. And then through the most of this novel, they're still married, I believe, but they're separated because of they just can't kind of reconcile.
Well, it's actually not a relationship issue. It's the wife has a mental breakdown and has to be taken care of. And so she's taken care of by the mom, and she doesn't want to be around him at all or at the house. So it's not like they have a bad relationship necessarily. It's like she just can't deal with anything.
And I feel like his relationship with Jasmine, who's this head that is she's a first generation pure, like the ultimate, like she's like
no genetic modifications.
Yeah. And it's given to him as a gift from, was it that religious organization that gives it to him, or was it just like a friend?
No, it was after he goes to that like weird party dinner, and he meets it was like an old friend who owns another factory.
Okay, that's what
he used to be, but he kind of hates that guy. And anyway, yeah. It is a gift.
This woman is gifted to him. It's a head, right? And the whole idea is that it's gifted to him so he can take it home and slaughter it himself and get this like really good, high quality, tasty, special meat. But he doesn't do that. He doesn't even want her at first, and I think he tries to give her back. And anyway, like, and then he starts to develop this relationship with her. But I feel like what they want you to think is that he's developing empathy for this creature, like realizing that it's really actually a human being, and is teaching her this stuff. And then suddenly when you get to the end, that's when I realized, I'm like, what it really was is him missing the relationship that he had with his wife. And he was using Jasmine again as like a cipher for his wife. Like, this is his chance to have this romantic relationship that he's been longing for. And then when he gets her pregnant, and she's about to give birth, which is kind of like the shock ending, right? Like Jasmine gives birth to their child. His wife comes to him because he calls her.
Yeah.
And he gives the baby to his wife. And then the book ends with him going out and slaughtering Jasmine. And then you suddenly realize that he didn't view her as a human. This was just something for him to use in order to get his wife back, right? Like, because his wife was so broken and distraught over the loss of their child, he found a way to get her another child and reconcile, their relationship.
Well, and what's interesting is she's dying essentially, but she could have been saved with a little bit of medical intervention.
Oh yeah.
The head and or the surrogate for the baby. And instead of doing anything compassionate toward her, he saw it as an opportunity to get his wife back. And in that, like, I don't know if he had planned this out ahead of time. It's not clear at all that he did, but in the moment he realized that he doesn't give a shit about the head or about those people at all. What he really cares about is his own relationships, his own life, his own happiness, his own like remedy for the bad feelings that he has. Because really he's just this like tortured dude who feels really bad about the death of his kid, and he wants his wife back, and his dad's dying and all this stuff. And we sort of put ourselves into the position where we're like, well, I care about the people who are being slaughtered. and he kind of finds it revulsion. Like, he doesn't eat meat or anything, and he finds it repulsive, and he doesn't like it, but it's not a big deal to him. It's not like the big deal it is to us that as we're reading it, that's the main problem for us, but it's really not the main problem of the main character. The main problem of the main character is his relationships with his dad and his wife and with himself. And it's kind of showing that people are inherently selfish to the degree that they're willing to do almost anything to get what they want, including using other people. And I think that that's actually what the story is about. I don't think it's about factory farming. I think it's about the main character and his struggle with getting what he wants and feeling good, however he can.
And I think that part of it, like you said, I don't think he plans it. I think he just suddenly realizes he takes advantage of this sudden circumstance that he finds himself in. And I think because sometimes we do a lot of things on a subconscious level. So I feel like his whole relationship with the female head that he gets, like, I wonder if at first he was just seeking out, human contact with something.
Yeah, I think so.
And
it was like his alcohol. It just was like a drug to use, and he just used her.
Yep. And then, but the way that they make you feel is that he's actually developing some sort of and then it's just, I think it just blew me away at the end when I suddenly realized, because I thought it was going to end with him, because so part of it, right, in a way, it's almost like the only way it could have ended, because it's illegal for him to have had
it would never
this
work.
Sexual relationship with this female head, and he couldn't treat, like, she's got the mark on her forehead like a brand, so it's like he can't hide that she was a head.
Well, he'd be getting inspected all the time.
Yeah.
And he almost got caught and all that. So
because there's like the people who want to show up and find out, like, there's a couple times that he almost gets caught.
Basically. He'd have to lie and say that they had slaughtered her, but then he would need like paperwork that said that it was done appropriately, which he said he could fake, but he doesn't end up. Well, maybe he does end up doing that after the end of the book, so he can, because he can just say I slaughtered her, whatever.
But so because I was thinking that was how I was like, oh, he's gonna like get caught and die or something, right? Or he's gonna take her and just run away and go into. I
thought he was gonna do something like that,
especially now that she's pregnant. Yeah,
I sort of forgot about the wife and kind of wrote her off.
Yeah, they don't
until she comes back at the end.
Yeah, because that's not a big, like, they don't.
I didn't even remember her name.
About that. Yeah,
I was like, who is this lady that's coming to help him? And then I remembered, like, it's his wife.
Yeah, same with like his relationship with his dad and his sister. Like, they're like almost just fragments of the story to kind of help flesh him out a little bit, but they're not a very. Because he's got a tenuous relationship with his sister, because she won't go see their father because of how elderly and sick he's become, and
she's vapid and she's like a sheep, and she just sort of does what she thinks is right, and she's a terrible mom and all this stuff, but her story goes really nowhere. It kind of doesn't matter that much. He sort of tells her off, and that's kind of like empowering for him. And I think that's part of it too, is he's starting to become, once his dad dies, he becomes empowered to do things for himself, and that's when his selfishness really ramps up, because before he's doing everything for his dad and his wife, and he's trying to get things back going, but then his dad dies and he has no more justification to do that job. So he starts to kind of like just do what he wants and like tell people the truth, which is fun as a character for him to do that. That's his change, which I think it might be part of the reason why he kind of gives up on giving a shit about the livestock people, is now that he realizes who he is or what he wants, he can do anything. He's empowered to kind of say, fuck it. Which in that world, I can see kind of being the only option, is kind of like, what's good for me? Because everything's shit. It's so horrible. The zoos, because the zoo is a big part of the book, where he goes to the zoo that he used to go to with his dad, but there's no animals there. It's this huge metaphor for the world. It's like a microcosm of the world, in that there's no life there. And that's kind of like what he's feeling, is there's no reason to do anything. But then the kid comes along and he has a reason to live again. So it's really well done. I was going to ask, like, I know you recommended it to me before, but would you recommend it to like everybody? Would you do you still recommend it? Yeah. I
would recommend it to people to read, because I think it's a pretty quick read. It's only like, it's between like maybe 250, 300 pages tops. I remember it was a pretty short
It's quick. Yeah.
It's a very concise read, but it's also very heavy.
Yeah. I didn't read like too many chapters in a row.
Yeah. So it's like, I recommend it to people with that caveat that like, this is a book that's heavy. Like it's not happy. It's not,
it's dark.
Like it's a very dark story, but it also proposes a lot of really fascinating ideas. I mean, like we just literally have been talking about it for like 2 hours almost, of just the ideas that are there, and like an examination of a culture that is very different from our own, but also similar in a lot of ways, with the ideas of capitalism and marketing and language that we use to package and sell the things that we farm now. But just all, like I said, all she really does is just swap out the product. Instead of it being cows, chickens, whatever farm animal, it's human beings. And so,
but doing that raises all change. The issues, raises everything. I was kind of wavering on whether or not I'd recommend it. I think for the philosophical reason, I would recommend it to somebody who's interested in thinking about these kinds of things.
Yeah.
I wouldn't recommend it to somebody who wants to read something.
Right. For fun.
Like for fun. It's not something where you're like, oh, I'll just read a book and then I'll like forget about it. It kind of forces you to think about things differently, but it does a really good job of the writing's really good. It keeps you interested. It's very well done, and the translation's great. I hope that it's as good as the original. I also I think that it is certain, like the fact that it's in the horror section, I think makes sense. I think it would be difficult to put this in a different setting. It's not. It's.
I feel like you could put it like maybe in like a literary fiction section if you really wanted to, but I feel like putting it into horror, I think it makes more sense,
especially because at the very end it is kind of it's kind of on a trajectory of potential goodness, and then it goes fuck all, like it's like humanity is fucked.
But what's interesting about the ending, right, though, is it's only awful for the head. He wins, he gets his wife back, he has a child. Totally. He has the potential for his life.
What I think it's awful for is the reader. I think that's the darkness. The darkness is that we're hoping for some hope for the head, which we have now kind of looked at as ourselves. With, but for him, that's why the selfishness is the main thing of the story. Is by the end you realize, oh, it's not about helping anybody but yourself. And then it makes me not like him as much, but it does I'm still empathetic toward him. I still get like it's a really rough fucking situation.
Well, it's an interesting thing to look at through the lens of that society, right? Because how many millions of head are probably slaughtered all the time? What's one more to give up in order for him to have a baby and get his wife? You know what I mean? So it's like,
that's why it's almost like, why not use these fucking products for your own good? Like, why not just make that part of the game, part of the situation? You would use them as genetic surrogates for people who need them. Like, I don't see why that wouldn't be legal.
It's really just horrible for Jasmine, who's the head, because she starts to trust him, right? Like she becomes comfortable around him and trusts him and feels safe with him. And then that suddenly just fucking ripped
and you
away
can just imagine the look on her face with like just super scared and stuff.
So it's like on a grand scale, it's not really horrible at all. It's on that very personal
interpersonal
relationship that the two had developed, and you thought it was gonna, that was gonna go a certain direction, and then just completely does a 180, and you'll suddenly realize,
well, and it needed to end, and it needed something. And I don't typically appreciate those types of endings. I like hope and fun and good endings where everyone fucking walks into the sunset. I don't like endings that sort of go, haha, fuck you, reader. But the more I talk about it, the more I get that the book is dark. It's not it's a look at the deepest, darkest, shittiest part of humanity, and that's kind of totally appropriate.
Well, and like I said, and then it also just depends on how you feel about Marcos at the end, right? Because you can be happy for him. He technically, like I said, it ends well for him. It's just the circumstances surrounding it.
I'm also kind of worried for him because it seems like he's going to get in a shit ton of trouble. So it's not 100%. Yeah. How do they do that? I don't think it's that simple that he can just get away with this. also any examiner of that body is going to know that she just had a baby and died from getting hit in the
hopefully
head.
He slaughters it and they eat her or something.
Well, and
you know,
he
or
does
whatever.
know how. So I think that I don't know if he's allowed to do that though. I think he's supposed to get a slip from he's supposed to, but they also like slaughter them live. Like they will cut an arm off and stop the bleeding. And that way every time it's fresh. So you can kind of get away with anything. But
it's a very heartbreaking ending. Like I just remember like feeling sort of depressed at the end of it. I was just like, fuck.
I was kind of upset. Like I was kind of like unsatisfied. I didn't like
I wasn't unsatisfied, but I think it's because depressing endings don't bother me. Like I'm always down for a really good heart. But when I write my own stories, I try to end all my stories with some sense of hope somewhere, even if a bunch of horrible things have happened.
Sure.
Because I agree. I feel like I prefer a story to end with at least a glimmer somewhere where you're like, oh my God, that was horrible, but at least this is happening. Right. And so in a way, this story has that, but at the same time, it's so dark that even that glimmer feels so dim. Like,
well, and that baby is just like this fucking like blood child, you know, like it's so tainted with moral issues, but you know, they wanted that baby, and people in
a way, I think it's a brilliant ending. It's because she could have gone for the safe ending of having them run away and go into hiding, but then that's not a really happy ending. Being in hiding, like you're gonna get caught eventually.
Well, and it wouldn't end. It would never end. You would have to just keep following these people around. And I think you're right. I think it is a brilliant way to end it, and it sort of like everything goes black, you know, like at the end of a movie, like, and you're like, oh, fuck. Obviously it'd be a great movie, but probably
I want to say that I think that the rights have been sold. It might be being turned into a movie or a TV show or something. I wouldn't be surprised I can see this being a really great, like mini, kind of like The Handmaid's Tale, you know, sort of like.
I think it's a great movie. I think they could cut a ton out of it. And just make it a fucking dark movie like The Road, like where there's no goodness. There's everything is depressing. The whole thing could be like shot like so that it seems like it's supposed to be happy, so it's all bright lit rooms like a comedy would be, but the actual circumstances are all horrible, which would make sense because they're in a factory. Everything would be bright, sterile, and it would make you think that there's something positive happening here, but nothing. It would just be the book, which I think it'd be really a fantastic
movie. Because the problem with turning into like a TV show is I feel like they would add too much to it.
Yeah,
because part of
and then you have relationships that don't exist. It's mostly just Marcos.
Because I think the brilliance of the book, right? Even though we kind of expressed a little bit of frustration as we were talking about like the logistics of all of this, but the what works so well in the book is that she just gives you enough to paint to give you the setting without, because you could write a 500-page novel just about
the world building,
the transition itself, right? You could be like, oh, day one, and then the whole process, and
it's kind of like like The Purge. Like if you go into the logic of it, it makes no sense. Falls apart. You have to accept it at the beginning. So to end this, I'm going to read the first paragraph.
Oh, okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Copyright to these fuckers. I'm not. Anyway, okay. So this is the first chapter 1. Carcass, cut in half, stunner, slaughter line, spray wash. These words appear in his head and strike him. Destroy him. But they're not just words. They're the blood, the dense smell, the automation, the absence of thought. They burst in on the night, catch him off guard. When he wakes, his body is covered in a film of sweat because he knows that what awaits is another day of slaughtering humans.
Brilliant.
Yeah, it's a good
that's
paragraph.
The kind of that's the paragraph that as soon as you read that, you're like, what? And then you just get drawn right in. You know, that's like one of those big things where it's like you gotta pull your reader in within like the first couple of sentences.
Yeah,
you gotta draw them in immediately with something. So like every book usually has to try to start with some sort of really cool, catchy hook, like right away.
Well, and if you look at this, it's a beautiful woman who's been made into a cow.
Yep, it's an awesome cover. It's like one of my favorite covers to a book that I've seen recently.
Yeah, it's abstract, but it actually isn't. It's actually literal.
Yeah, and
not really, but you know what I'm saying. Like it's not as abstract as you'd think once you realize that this is a cow head.
Mm-hmm. Anyway, I like how simple it is too. It's literally just that. You know what I mean? It's not this big painting with all these things. It's just a very direct, specific image.
Sure.
I prefer covers like that though, that are like kind of simple and like minimalist in a way.
Sure.
But no, it's a great story, and I recommend people read it. Even if just prepare yourself. You're not gonna have like a good. You're not gonna have fun with it, which is a weird thing to recommend when you're like want to read something. Well, this isn't fun, but it's good.
Yeah, it's not fun. It's not fun, but it's good. It is really good. Yeah. It's like it's compelling. Mm-hmm. Is what I would say. It's like makes you want to know what's going to happen and what's next and all.
And it kind of sits with you. I mean, it sat with me for a while after I finished it. Like it was a book that I kind of just kept thinking about. And it's a book that I'm definitely going to reread at some point too, because it's just like it's one of those books. I think when you know how it ends, you can reread it under a different kind of lens and maybe get a different understanding, especially for Marcos and his kind of motivations, because you really think one thing about him, and then at the end, when it's kind of flipped on its head, you suddenly realize that you didn't really know him as well as you thought you did while reading the story.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you projected yourself too much onto the situation. You weren't really accepting his story, at least for me. And then at the end, you're like, oh, what? Now I'm not in this anymore. It's now I got to look at it differently.
Yeah.
Which is clever. So cool. Well, that was good. Check the book out if you want. It's interesting and worth a read. Speaking of recommendations, do you have an alternate recommendation?
Actually, yeah. I literally just finished the audiobook today because it was a book that I didn't really want to read because of how insanely long it is. But I finished, and this isn't like some secret unknown thing, but The Stand by Stephen King, the uncut version of it that came out in 1990. I just listened to the audiobook. It was like 45 hours long. I've been listening to it for like the last probably week and a half, 2 weeks. And it's really good. It was a good book. I think most people are probably familiar with it from the miniseries that came out in like 1994 with Gary Sinise and Molly Ringwald. And because I grew up watching that the miniseries. My mom had the VHS tapes of it. I think it was like one of those double VHS tape fucking things in a box. But I remember watching it like quite a few times actually growing up, and it was always a story that I found fascinating. It was kind of one of the first stories that I remember experiencing as a child that dealt with a post-apocalyptic world. And it was one, and I found that such a fascinating setting, and even to this day, like post-apocalyptic and dystopian stuff is still like one of my favorite kind of genres of fiction to explore because there's so many different ways that you can go at it. But The Stand is really good. It's a good audiobook to listen to. Like I said, it's so long. I read Stephen King's It like last year, not last year, I think it was the year before. And that was also like a 1,300 page book. And it was just so exhausting to read through it. And it took it's just such a commitment. And so when it came to The Stand, I was going to buy the book, and I was like, you know what? I feel like this would be a good audiobook because it's something I can listen to while I'm working out, while I'm going on walks, and just kind of digest it over time, like almost like an episodic TV show thing. And it worked really well. And it helped. I think it helped me enjoy the story a little bit more instead of trying to sit there with this giant fucking, I think it's like 1,400 pages, the uncut version.
Fuck.
And it's just so long, and I just didn't feel like committing time. I was like, man, I could read like 5 or 6 other books in the time.
It's like 1,000 pages too much.
Yeah. That's how I felt about it when I read it. I was like, he could have cut like 300 or 400 pages out of this thing and it would have been way better. There's just too many.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting?
Things.
Yeah. It's almost like self-indulgent to do that much writing. Like you can write that, but should you really put that out to other people? Like, is that part important?
Well, so he started writing The Stand in 1975 and he finished it in 78. And then his publisher required him to cut 400 pages out of it. And they told him that either they could have a professional editor do it or he could do it himself. And he elected to do it himself. So he cut the 400 pages.
Yeah.
So when The Stand first came out, it was, probably about 900 pages long.
Yeah.
And then in the late 80s, he had such a demand from fans to get like an uncut. They wanted to read like the full, his like original vision kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so he, by then, he had enough clout as a writer. He could do whatever the fuck he wanted. And so he did the uncut version, which came out in 1990. And he basically added in, he said most of the stuff that was cut out. And then he updated all the cultural references because the book originally takes place in 1980. And then when he re-released it, he said it in 1990. So he like updated a bunch of cultural
That's
things
a lot of
in
work.
it. Yeah, and so and then that's the the version that I just listened to. So yeah, it's so there is a shorter version of it that exists, which maybe it was interesting because as I was maybe it's because I was listening to it instead of reading it, but it didn't feel too like overly long. There's definitely extraneous stuff. I'm like, you could have just not had that chapter in there at all. It doesn't really do much. But yeah, overall, it's really good. And they redid the TV show last year on CBS All Access, which I've heard is not very good in comparison to the original miniseries. And like if you've watched the miniseries from the '94, pretty much that's a really good distilled version of the story, because the miniseries basically does all the main events, like the really important stuff. It's obviously just missing these other little maybe subplots and extraneous stuff, and it obviously cuts out some characters. But if people aren't interested if you've never experienced The Stand and you want something that's easily digestible, I would recommend the miniseries from 1994. But if you're really interested, like I totally recommend the audiobook. It's on Audible for the uncut edition. Herbert Hoover is the narrator. He does a fantastic job.
Good old Herbert Hoover.
Or not Herbert Hoover. I think it's, oh God.
Is that a real name?
Why am I thinking of Herbert Hoover? I'm going to look at it.
Is that the guy who invented the vacuum?
Yes. Shit. Now I feel bad because I think I got his name wrong. Hold on. Let me just double check real quick. Title
My
details.
name's Herbert Hoover.
It's it's Herbert Hoover. It's Grover Gardner.
It's like
very
one
close
of those
in a weird way. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Herbert
funny.
Hoover. That's funny. No, Grover Gardner is the director.
There's a spot in your brain that has people who have weird names that start with the same letter.
Yeah.
And those are right next to each other.
But yeah, the length is 47 hours and 47 minutes for the
47 hours.
Yep, 47 hours.
That's
basically 48 hours.
That's a week and a half of work.
So listening to audiobooks, right? Like I listen to so many audiobooks now, and it makes me realize how often I'm just doing things where I listen to stuff, because I go on multiple walks a day. I go for runs, working out. So it's like I'm doing all this stuff, and that's why I switched to listening to so many audiobooks instead of just like listening to music, because I'm like, there's so many more stories I'm going to be able to enjoy if I just listen to them while I'm doing other stuff. Instead of listening to like the same 20 albums of music over and over again that I've already heard 1,000 times, I can actually experience new stuff. Same with podcasts. I just got to this point where I felt like every podcast I was listening to was people just talking about the same shit over and over again.
Yeah, fuck podcasts.
Yeah, so fuck podcasts.
Listen to a book.
Well, I was listening to like some video game podcasts and stuff, and it's like you only really need to listen to one, because if they're all talking about the same news, you're like,
I get burned out on that shit too. But that's the same with like any type of like, it's like a TV show that you watch for fucking 20 seasons. You're like, why am I watching this anymore? It's fucking boring. But but it just depends, and you switch around. The beauty of
books, though, is that you get the story and then it's over. You find the next story. It's just a new experience each time.
Well, and they're cheap enough that you especially with like even audio, you can listen to it. If you don't like it, stop listening. Just get to something else.
Yeah.
Cool.
So that's my recommendation is The Stand. Pretty much anyway. I want to watch the new version of it now after I rewatched the '94 miniseries, because I haven't seen it in years. But The Stand, whether it's the miniseries from '94 or if you want to actually sit down with the 1,300-page tome that he wrote, or, just listen to it on Audible if you can, if you're a subscriber. What about you?
My recommendation is the movie Willow on it's on Netflix now, and it's an oldie but a goodie. It's fantasy. I think it was probably 90s, 80s movie.
Yeah, the 80s. Yeah.
It's reminds me of like Princess Bride meets The Labyrinth meets Star Wars. Like it's got
I think Lawrence Kasdan, who wrote the Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, I think he did that movie or wrote it or something like that.
Let's look it up. Willow. It's really good. It's super fun. It's got freaking Val Kilmer before he sucked.
Dude, Val Kilmer, I feel bad for him in a way. Like he had such a huge. It came out in 1988.
He had some great stuff.
He had a huge career, and then it just and then he got fucking throat cancer after his kind of career was waning. And Ron Howard directed it, but it was written by George Lucas, so that's why it's got this.
It's because it's got like the. I mean, it's even got kind of a Lord of the Rings vibe, because of the little people. They call them pecs, but that's sort of a derogative term.
I know, right? Isn't that interesting when you go back and watch some of this old stuff? You're like, that is language that would not fly nowadays. That is for sure.
Well, but that's made up in that world. We don't call.
Could you imagine walking up to a little person and be like, "Hey, what's up, peck?"
Yeah, I would
Either
imagine
they've watched Willow and would be sort of find it maybe endearing, or they would kick you in the fucking balls and be like, "What the fuck's wrong with you? I'm not a peck. What is that?"
It doesn't sound nice.
No, it doesn't.
Because like animals peck you or whatever.
Because like I remember for a while, like it was midget, and then dwarf was another term that was used, and now like it's like little person. This last one I knew.
I think dwarf is still technical. Dwarf is kind of like retard, and let me explain.
Yeah, right. No, yeah. Don't snippet that out.
The technical medical term for certain conditions is dwarfism. That's like the medical term for it. I think that's still the medical term for it. And to me, like if you're using the medical term, it's kind of like penis. Like it's, you should be able to say that normally. Obviously, being mean to people is a different situation.
Yeah, the slang of it, because it's like mental retardation. You can't just.
But that's the medical term for a retarded person is retard. To be retarded is not bad. It's I mean, it's not. There's no ethical, moral. It's not derogatory. It's the medical term for something that is not developed fully.
It was adopted as slang, right, and became such a negative connotation.
But originally, retarded wasn't slang. It was just what you would call them.
Actually, an example is in The Stand. There's a character, Tom Cullen, who is mentally retarded, and they call him a retard.
That's still what it's called,
but it's not like a
now I think it's developmentally disabled or something like that, or mentally disabled. But whatever, it's a medical term, and we don't like using it, and that's because people abused people, not because the term is necessarily a bad way to use language. Anyway, that's
why a faggot's a bundle of sticks, but
But I don't think that's been the case in America. I think that was the case in England, and it still is. They still actually
they'll still say that they're going to go smoke a fag because a fag is a cigarette.
They still say that, and that's the weirdness of language, is that we get a little precious about our use of taboo terms.
Yeah, you say smoke a fag in America, that means something completely different.
Yeah, language evolves depending on what we want to do with it, and you can push the limits with language. And it's
I've actually never watched all of Willow, though. I watched like maybe half of it, and I think it's one of those movies that I didn't see it soon enough in my life for it to have an impact. If you go back and watch it now, I'm just like, okay.
It's long too. It is pretty long.
Ghostbusters. That's like one of those movies that like everybody loves, and I just didn't
I'm
watch
not
it
that
as a
into
kid.
that either.
And I watched it a few years ago for the first time, and I'm like, I don't really understand why people love this so much. But it's really not that great.
Ninja Turtles, like I was a kid when I watched the first Ninja Turtles movies. I still watch it. I'm like, I fucking love it. So it totally depends. You have a nostalgic factor.
Yeah, it's all about nostalgia. That's why when like if there's something I missed like that was like a big cultural thing for a lot of people, I'm like, sorry, I just didn't get to it in time. And
like
now
Pokemon, I have no idea why that's important. But with Willow, I wouldn't recommend it for like an adult to
watch for the first time.
Watch for the first time necessarily. I think if you have kids, it's a good one to watch with kids because it's fun, it's funky, if you liked it before, watch it again. But I could see why it doesn't necessarily hold up. It's also kind of cheesy and it's old fashioned and the graphics aren't great, but I like it a lot. I like the characters in it.
For kids, I think it's awesome. I think if you had a kid nowadays, right, that watched it and just kind of grew up watching it a few times, that they would have a relationship with that film, and so they'd probably still enjoy it as an adult. But if you didn't get to it when you were young enough, it probably wouldn't do much for you.
Probably not.
It's a good recommendation though. Or I feel like that's a good recommendation for a lot of people who I could see that being a movie that people kind of forgot about. And then you bring it up.
That's what I mean. Like for me, like I was like excited, like, I get to watch that again. Yeah. I'm sure there's other movies like that. Oh, there was one I saw on Amazon. It's Sidekicks, and it's with Chuck Norris and this kid who's like has asthma, and he learns karate from Chuck Norris, and he becomes his sidekick, and he has these like daydreams where he's like Chuck Norris's sidekick, and then he like at the very end ends up meeting Chuck Norris, and it's like super cool. And he gets bullied, and then he fights the bully. It's like a Karate Kid movie, but just a little bit different.
That's American film for you. We learn if you have a problem with bullies, go learn karate from a Hollywood hero.
Kick their butt
and go fight them
in a tournament.
Yeah.
I also watched Dodgeball, which totally is amazing. I totally
the
recommend
dodgeball
that
is good.
as well.
I enjoy that. Yeah.
That
you
one
can dodge a wrench.
up.
You can dodge a ball.
It's so fucking good. It's so funny. Oh my god. Yeah, that's a great movie.
Nobody makes me
freaking
blood.
Yeah. Ben Stiller.
Yeah.
He hasn't made anything in a while.
Isn't it funny? That was like during that time period where there was a bunch of comedy films that came out, all that had to do with a sport. Yeah. There was the dodgeball. Then Will Ferrell did like Blades of Glory. There was ice hockey. Then he did that basketball one. Was it a semi-pro?
Yeah. Yeah. Like they were using that formula.
Yeah. It was like,
but dodgeball, I think, was before a lot of that stuff.
Yeah.
And then like old school, but that wasn't really about that kind of stuff.
But same actors.
But there was like baseball movies. I think Hot Shots, one of those had baseball in it. There's that one with it's like like the cover of the movie is like a baseball with like a bat going through it or something.
Yeah. Now that I'm thinking about it, maybe it was just Will Ferrell that went through that phase because he did that Kicking and Screaming movie about the kids soccer team. And then he had like 3 or 4 movies, like almost all back to back.
Well, and then he did the singing one recently with
Rachel McAdams.
Rachel McAdams. I liked it. I thought it was fun.
Was that Eurovision or something like that?
Yeah, Eurovision, like but it has a long subtitle, like the importance of singing badly or something. But it was okay. It had like all the story arcs that you need.
Yeah, a lot of those movies follow the same beats, right? Like they're underdogs of some kind or has-beens. Then they have
it's like a duo. So success. At some point, the duo has to like break apart so they can come back together and do the best they've ever done.
Whereas sometimes they come from opposite walks of life, but then they learn to work together.
Yeah.
And then things are going really well for them. And then right before whatever the final tournament or thing is, something happens that fractures them again.
Yeah.
But then they come back together.
They come back right at the last second so they can win the tournament.
This pattern of story.
Yeah. Anyway. Conflict resolution.
Same with like romantic comedies. They all follow the same fucking plot.
Yeah.
For the most part, it's like, 2 people, unexpected people fall in love. Things are going well. Then something from one of their pasts comes up and
one of them lies or like doesn't tell them some. I hate that the lying in television and movies is so obnoxious. It's always going to bite you in the ass. Your lack of communication always is the problem. No one ever cares. It's just that you lied that they care.
Yeah.
It's so funny. It's always like you're watching it and you're like, can you just stop it? It's not helpful.
Yeah. No, it gets frustrating to watch sometimes. But. Yeah. Good stuff. This is a good episode. Hopefully people enjoyed it. Hopefully somebody that listens to the episode also has read Tender as the Flesh. Otherwise, a lot of this might be a little confusing. But
yeah, I don't know. That's why I kind of wanted to talk about some of the, like
the
more applicable stuff. That cannibalism is as a general theme.
Well, I'm glad we didn't go plot by plot because it's like if you're really interested, just read it. I mean, it's more talking about like you said, the ideas in the story versus like what actually happens, because there's a lot that happens in the story we didn't talk about, but
yeah, for sure. It's just a interesting jumping off point to have the chattings. All right, let's be done. Go to joesnosblog.com for the notes. I'm going to put the notes that I put up there, just put them on there.
Oh, okay.
So people can read. They're just mostly like questions to kind of get us thinking about it. And I put a couple links to like little like a video about cannibalism in North Korea, actually, which is starting to pop up recently. And I think I put a little link about that Kuru disease.
Prion disease. I think I had to stop and look up what that was when they were talking about it in the book. I was like, what the fuck is that? Is that a made up disease? And then I was like, oh, never mind.
I don't think she mentions the name of it because I don't know if that's the official term for it, but
okay.
She says stuff about like you can get sick from it or whatever, and then they sort of breeze over it. But that's going to do it for us. And we'll see you next time.
Yep. Toodaloo.
Bye.